Hello and welcome to the Care Experience podcast. In this podcast, myself and Thomas, we are going to be interviewing Patrick Freyne from the Irish Times, who just over the weekend wrote a lovely article about Care Day and about the work we do in Epic empowering people in care. Also, we have an amazing interview with Leilani Houston from Australia, who talks a little bit about the care system down there. And without further ado, we'll get going with this. Thank you. Welcome to the Care Experience. We're here. We've an amazing guest.
Thank you.
Patrick Freyne from the Irish Times is here with us in the Care Experience podcast today.
So I'm having the tables turned on me.
The tables are turned. We're taking everything out of context.
Yeah, everything's on the record now, Patrick.
Oh
no! On this day, 2004.
Yeah.
We know what you did.
Yeah, we do.
We don't.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for doing this for us. It's interesting.
No bother.
As we were talking earlier, I always thought a podcast would be a great thing about the care system, and then Thomas came up with the idea and came up with the name, which I think is great. The Care Experience. Brilliant.
It required a lot of thought.
Yeah.
Proper, deep into thought. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah. What is your been? I've read a lot of articles you've written about the care system, and I've liked them. Like, you know what I mean. You bring a real humanity to them. They're not statistics. You really present the young people, as human beings, and there's a warmth to them. Tell us about some of the stories you've done and how they've affected you.
How the stories
might have affected you.
Okay, so in general, one of the things I'm kind of constantly conscious of as a journalist is that journalists tend to come from very similar backgrounds all the time, which is a bad thing. And it means that their experience of the world tends to be a very middle class, often a very Dublin experience of the world. And therefore other voices don't always get in. And it's really feels important to me that there's an awful lot of voices that don't get, there's opinion journalism all over the world where people just get my opinion of this, my opinion of that. And the stuff I'm more interested in tends to be trying to talk to people whose voices aren't normally heard. But as we were talking about earlier, there's a tension in that between, and you mentioned it earlier as well, Tom. There's a tension between presenting someone's experience and exploiting them.
Yeah.
And some journalism definitely falls on the wrong side of that.
Yeah.
And even I worry sometimes that I'm falling on the wrong side of that. But we could talk about that from your experience of being interviewed. Yeah.
I was just explaining how everyone that I've talked to with care, they don't come off as victims.
Yeah.
Nearly everyone. No, I'm joking. Don't come off as victims because we're not victims. Stuff happens, but we're not crying in the corner every night.
Yeah.
The way I explain stuff is I learn from it. I'm just talking about my experiences. Yeah. Let's have a conversation. It was the same thing, just recording and having a conversation. But it was turned into some big massive victim show.
Yeah.
Which, again, I'm not a victim. I didn't like that. I don't want to come across like that. Plus, by doing that, you're not relating to anyone. Yeah. You're okay. Fair enough. Oh, you have a headline and you have this story, and people feel sorry. But people, it's not going to connect properly because you're not actually relating to anyone.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the challenge then for a journalist, I don't know if I always get it right, is to try and present people as rounded people. So they might have had this experience, but they're also into terrible Adam Sandler films or whatever.
Yeah.
They've got there's more to this person, and sometimes in the process of making articles that gets flattened out. So you get this weird thing. You're very conscious of the issues in the care system, the good things and the bad things. So there are a lot of kids that come through the system and they are fine and they had a relatively good experience, and then there are kids who come out of the system and end up homeless. And so there's problems in the system that need to be highlighted, and so you get up, there's all these kind of ethical issues then where to represent those problems properly, like you said, statistics don't speak to anybody, but people's stories do. So but then the problem is you don't want to just tell one kind of story where it's like everyone in care is tragic, which isn't true.
Yeah, which is like it's about how people handle things as well. Like you could be throwing something traumatic, but if you're handling it, you could have a different understanding and perspective, and because of those experiences, you could handle it way differently than someone who has, as I was saying, not as something. Maybe like even people who come off as like victims or not, maybe they just don't like, like small thing is thrown at them, but they've never experienced like something bigger than that. Yeah. So like it's huge to them, and it's like, oh, this is me. Like my opinion matters. I don't know where I'm going with this. It's just let me try to articulate where am I going with this. Yeah, like not everyone is like victims, as I was saying, or like not everyone's like messed up mentally because of it. Some are obviously, but just because like something big happened to you doesn't mean you have to be messed up. Like as I said myself, I'm pretty good. Like, and I'm not saying I had like a massive terrible one, but like.
I think the reality as well is people are pretty complex and rounded and complex, and people have had bad things happen. Some people have had bad things happen to them, but they've also had good things happen to them, and people have had, there might be areas they're sensitive about because it's been an issue for them, but they also are freaking great at art, and they're doing really well in that world, and it's when I say it's a danger, like I think sometimes I have fallen on the side of telling the sadder side of the story too much, and sometimes then, like you were talking about specific stories, like Shane Griffin who died recently, who was an amazing activist, and like Shane is somebody who someone else put in touch with me 4 years ago because he wanted someone to tell the story of his experiences in the care system, and whereas he was telling quite a negative story because he'd had some very bad experiences, he was an amazing, funny man. Yeah. Like, and it's difficult, like in the context of the article, it's hard to bring that side of him across, and I tried to bring that across. I remember I read it recently, I reread it recently, and I thought you did get that across, and I thought Shane was incredibly generous with the amount of information that he gave you about his life. It was very sad. But I remember quite soon after that, Shane had been in the Dáil, and he was presenting some of his research, and he was talking to all these legislators, and he'd done a huge amount of work, and he was in a radio interview with another very big journalist, and all that journalist could zone in was the sad stuff that Shane was talking about. And I remember listening to it going, stop asking him about that stuff. Stop. Well, yeah, he's after coming from the Dáil. He's making all this work. He's doing all this work. And I was so pissed off at Matt Cooper. But I was really pissed off at him for not going into the amazing work that he had actually done. Yeah. And I rang Shane afterwards because I knew from Shane, because every time Shane started to talk about the stuff he was working on, the journalist Matt Cooper brought him back into his childhood. And I rang Shane and said, Jesus, Shane, are you okay? Because I really thought he was re-traumatised by that interview. And it saddened me, because I do think there is sometimes, and that's why, like I said, that's why I contacted you to do this piece instead of some other journalist about Care Day, because I thought you do present young people with care experience as human beings, and sometimes people, and maybe it's society's fault, people like a sad story, people like to, but I'm be very careful with the young people that I work with, that I'm not re-traumatising them and by telling them tell their sad stories again and again.
I think it's like you were saying, it's like I can present my story, or like anyone can present their story as a story, because, like, for example, you talk about your life and say something bad has happened. That's just your life. You're just explaining it. Yeah. So like if you're like if some journalist or something's written like comes back like just taken out of context, so they're writing it down, they might just take bad things and just like explode them up, so it sounds like you had a way worse life than you had. And I think as a person, like, as it comes back to being complex, just what you're saying, like, so he's doing a lot of work and you're going to just talk about one thing. That literally makes no sense. And what is your agenda really? Like, you want a story, but that I think that kind of speaks to the character of the person, and as a writer and a journalist, like as a writer and journalist, I think it shows your lack of effort
Yeah.
and your lack of understanding, and I think it's like you should probably not be doing a job like.
Yeah.
I get it. Like it's a tough. You're doing radio. You want to get a piece. You're doing your bit. You may not be thinking about that deeply about this person that you just want to get.
I'm now thinking
story.
I should be recording this because that was really good. I might
think-
get this
yeah,
recording
sure,
and use
yeah.
some of this. Like I think it's a real interesting thing that I struggle with a lot. Is just that when I think good journalism is really important, right? And it's still done, believe it or not, in a lot of them. What's really important about it is telling other people about other experiences in other lives. But there's always that kind of spectre hovering over it of exploitation and the fact that people like a good, neat narrative. They like a story with happy ending, story with sad ending. And you can't completely get away with that when you tell any story. Like even when you shape a story about your own life, you end up putting some weird structure on it because that's just what humans do. But you want to try and make sure in as much as possible that there's a living, breathing human in the story. That it's not just, this is a person who represents, in inverted commas, something about the system that I want to make a point about. And the problem, I guess, particularly as journalism gets more rushed, is that there's a danger of flattening people into like caricatures more than used to happen in the past.
Yeah.
I still think people do like some like excellent writing and excellent reporting and stuff where people can breathe as humans.
But it's not as much as it used to be, and it's the clickbait.
It's more the speed at which they work. Yeah.
And it serves to kind of polarize society as well, like into the right, the left, into like you're not getting the full breadth of people's experience. But with a lot of the internet kind of stuff that you're seeing these days, there's very few. And I suppose I'm as bad as anyone. I used to buy the Times every day. But I just click on my journal now and I scroll through the horrible comments and I'm as infected
and you get
as
drawn to like terrible clickbait headlines that you know you're going to hate.
The thing about the like just with headlines as well and clickbait, it's so easy for people to scroll on Facebook or something like that or just on the internet, read the headline, not read anything else. So that's also the problem as well. It's not even, it's the journalism, but like it's just it's their ignorance not to read something, but like talk about it like they're an expert. That's also the issue. Like, you know, when people try to talk about stuff like, oh, I know so much information, question them on a little thing. I don't know. Yeah. You know, like people just and like some people say with so much confidence that you're not even going to say, like you wouldn't even question them. Like
that's all you need to do these days is talk slowly and with confidence, and people are going to believe any shit you say. Like, you know,
Well,
that's what you hear the way you said that confidently and slow.
You just proved your point.
Yeah. But they say people are more confident about stuff. Like the more they say about scientists, the more they learn about something, the more they say, I don't have a clue. It's just, but the simpler your understanding of something, the less you've read, the more confident people tend to be.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's like people feel probably embarrassed by asking them. Yeah. But if I don't know something, it's just like when you said some word earlier, I was like, oh, what is it like? I think you should practice that more, just asking someone the question, like, and then you can learn information. Everyone's not experts at everything. Like
I always ask if I don't understand.
Yeah, like you think it'd be common sense, but like people do. I know people feel embarrassed or they don't want to feel like they're inferior or anything like that. But I think it's good just to ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
one of the things they do over in Scotland, Who Cares Scotland is our sister organisation over there, and if they've one of the guys, Kenny, really thick Scottish accent, he's a good crack. I want to get him on the podcast very soon. But
ginger.
He's blonde, I think.
Not Scottish.
Yeah, but whenever he sees a journalist in the Scottish papers and he sees it, as he calls it, othering memory care community, he'll contact them and explain to the journalist what they've done and say, if you want to come in, I'll give you a 2-hour discussion about why you've done it, why you shouldn't do it anymore.
What sort of, could you give me an example of the type of thing you'd have gone?
Yeah, I suppose they would talk about a unit that's been closed down, and some of this stuff is written with really good intention. A unit's been closed down, and some of the troubled children that are there that have mental health issues, They've nowhere to put them, and there's all this. Now this is an actual thing that happened. The unit was in a very remote part of Ireland, and the young people saw it and said, "That's us. We're not troubled children with mental health issues." And also you see then sometimes when kids have gone missing, and that happens all the time in the journal or whatever, they will say, and it leaves the comments open, and you'll see all the comments in all these little scrotes and stuff like this, horrific stuff, and they're leaving it open. There's no need to have a comment section on a missing child piece, especially when they're putting negative comments and stuff like that. Oftentimes I'm not one to defend Tusla at the best of times, but you'll never see a positive story about the social workers, the work they're doing, the positive work about the vast majority foster carers that are doing amazing work. We have an amazing foster care system over here compared to most countries. We're going back to Brehon times. We've had fosterage going on, it's a rich tradition going along for a couple of millennia, which foster carers are still, it's a different system, but it's still happening along the same lines as it happened a couple of thousand years ago. You will just hear negative stories about the care system, about the system, and there's never a positive story about the people. And there is, don't get me wrong, there is a lot more, we don't have a longitudinal study done about people when they leave care in terms of prison and in terms of, but I'm in and out of prisons a good bit, and I can tell you there's a lot more people who've been in the care system in there, and in homelessness as well. Unfortunately, that's the truth. But it is the balance. How do you present that without stigmatizing the people who you're involved with? The resources.
Which is why Care Day and stuff like that is important for you, right?
100%, yeah.
Because it's about presenting a more balanced picture.
Yeah, and I think the interesting point is, how did they get there? What led to them getting there? Just example, if it's just an easy example. If everyone in your life has told you you're not going to be anything, you're going to end up in prison and all this, what do you think is going to happen? You're probably going to believe them because it's the self-worth and all that. And also, if you're not been presented with the opportunity to go on a counselling, or being presented with a counsellor who understands, because there is a lot of cases where the counsellors are gobsmacked by what people are saying from care, and they have no understanding how to deal with it. That's not going to reflect positively on people in care either. Neither is CSP and education and just adding different kind of families and explaining it properly, because it's almost like urban myths, right, where people be troubled, or I heard this story about, I heard this someone so when I was in class last year, people are talking about travellers and no one knew I was a traveller, right? So they're talking about travellers. One fella says, if a traveller dies in the house, do you burn down the house, right? And just stuff like this, which with that, and I said back to him, so if they die in a shopping centre, do you burn down the shopping centre? It's just ridiculous stuff. It's this because you've never really been encountered with, so it's oh bum. And there's obviously negatives, there's negatives of everything. If you highlight you can highlight negatives anything, especially with Peter, and he's but you can highlight the negative as anything, but it's hard to talk about the positives. And the reality is people don't really want to talk about the positives either, because it comes back, it's like an X Factor kind of thing where everyone has a emotional story,
yeah. Leilani, the Australian woman we interviewed the other day, she said she didn't kind of come out to her friends about being in the care system, and when she did, one of them says, "Well, you don't look as if you've been in the care system."
The people always say that to me about, "Oh, you don't look like a traveller," and I was like, what's a traveller look like?
Yeah,
I don't know. See, ignorance, but it's blind ignorance as well. It's not they don't even know why they're ignorant.
So just an observation, just when the things I was talking about the tensions in journalism, one of the problems is that certain groups are only written about. They're not writing about themselves. They're not getting the opportunities to write about or talk about themselves. And it's to do with the fact that, like I was saying at the start of this discussion, like so many journalists come from similar backgrounds to me, kind of middle class families and
Mr. Privilege. Not like me and you, Peter.
Oh.
Power to the people.
But it means that you get this kind of weird imbalance in the storytelling, about society, which is why it's really important that you're writing stuff, and because they're getting. And people are telling and talking about their own stories, because you don't object. I mean, okay, like I was saying, you put a narrative on everything, but if you're putting the narrative on your own story, you own it. It's your own narrative. It's like the danger is when it's gobshites like me telling other people's stories all the time, and because other people haven't had the opportunities I've had to get in the door of a place like the Irish Times. And the Irish Times and newspapers are trying to address that, but they're always a few steps behind the realities,
Yeah, actually, one of my teachers, I won't say his name, but he used to be a journalist, and he was doing a piece about the travellers. They were like there's a load of caravans. So I used to say trailers in the middle. They're like a state and field, and they're making a mess and all that. And he went down to interview them, and there's only one left.
Mm.
But he was talking to your one, and she was like, I'm only moving here because there was trouble in where I was living. I think it was a halting site or something. People breaking the windows and all that. Mm. And I'm just trying to get more safety and all that. Explaining a different perspective. It's the newspaper didn't want to accept that. They're like, well, it's not good enough.
It's not fitting in with the bias.
Yeah. It's not pushing the agenda we want.
I will say, I've never had a story tampered with or been told to take a different perspective. Now, I do think the Irish Times is, I know I'm biased, but I do think they have a higher standard of ethics than some newspapers.
Yeah, I know, you would to think so. No.
There are, I would believe that certain media organisations have had agendas like that in the past. I think it's more, the main problem that I'd see in the bits of journalism I'm involved with is just that it's the same kinds of people telling the stories.
Yeah.
So we need to make a more balanced picture of the world. We need people from more varied backgrounds in there, in RTE and in the Irish Times and in the Irish Independent and everywhere else. Because what's happening at the moment is, even when someone like me tries to be balanced, I'm still coming from a narrow perspective, and I learn from talking to other people, but it would be kind of better if there was a bigger selection of people sitting around the table making decisions in the Irish Times or in anywhere.
But that's it's a good thing, because even in conversation, if you it's interesting to see different people's perspectives.
Yeah, and
it's good that you're trying, because I think everyone should try to do that with all different things. This fella Charlemagne the God, he's a radio host and he's an author, New York's bestseller and all that. He was, I think he was saying, as a child he was encouraged to read books of people who was outside of some old white lady or Chinese or someone that's black or gay, or learn about different people's experiences and all that, and try to have more of a neutral understanding. But it is hard not to be biased and stuff.
We're humans, we're kind of, it's kind of part of being part of surviving. You kind of pick up all these things that you think make your life easier to believe, but it's always really great to believe yourself open to have those biases challenged and stuff like that.
And which is why, if trying not to be biased is good, but you're not always going to succeed. But which is why it would be better if there was kind of more diversity in decision making places, because then the biases would kind of balance out. If everyone was biased in different directions. The problem happens when you've got a bunch of people from the same backgrounds or even the same schools. The front bench of Fine Gael, they've all been to private schools. If they're
private school.
Shut up, right?
Are you from the streets? Is that what you're
from the streets.
The mean streets of Newbridge.
Mean streets.
I completely agree, and that's why one of the things with the podcast as well, it's called Care Experience, but it's to inform people, like just people, like, which opens the debate, which opens the conversation, which challenges opinions and perspectives, and then that's how things change. And I think that's important. But I think like
I hope you've seen the actual real passion that's gone into the Care Day thing. Like, you know, I hope that's apparent, that it's not just a, you know, another big event for the children. You know, it's a real attempt to address the stigma and the, you know, the stereotypes that can go on, and actually a real attempt to change society and something that came from young people. And I'm just really happy to be able to facilitate it, like, as a professional, to put as much, like, we do as a team, and with ourselves and the young people, we work very, very hard, because it's something we all believe in really strongly, like. And
even if you look, it's like before Care Day, there's another thing with like younger kids, like under 18s, in where is it again?
In the Mansion House.
In the Mansion House, and then the Vikings splash tour afterwards. Yeah. Like that's important to see. Like
we probably have MC Tiny coming up.
Who's MC Tiny?
He was on the Late
Toy Show. He's a little rapper.
I didn't see it this year.
He's a little 11-year-old. He met us. He was down in the cabin when we were recording the song we were doing. But he's hopefully coming up to do some of his rap.
But that.
Jeez, I must remind that.
Yeah, the Mansion thing with the young people is brilliant. Like the whole thing about Care Day is like, it's like an acceptance thing, and it's like showing like the younger kids like it's all right, and like just having fun and just embracing your differences, like
having like role models like Thomas here, so they can aspire to be like him.
You prick.
Already aspiring to be like him.
You prick.
Listen, thanks for coming by.
It was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Now, fair play to you for coming by and having a chat with us. We're looking forward to reading the article, which is hopefully on the 15th.
15th, yeah.
We may get this podcast wrapped up and get it out before that as well. You know, right in on the crest of the clickbait fame. Okay, listen, thanks a million. Cheers. Mind yourself.
Thank you.
We really enjoyed doing that interview with Patrick Freyne. We have a lot of really good podcasts for you coming up over the next couple of days. It's only a few days until Care Day. Care Day is on the 21st of this of February this year. So we're going to go straight into this next interview with Leilani Houston from Australia. I hope you really enjoy it. Okay, I'd like to welcome Leilani Houston from Queensland, Australia, to the Care Experience. How are you, Leilani?
Good. How's it going?
We're going well. I'm just marveling at the technology involved. We're pretty much sitting in a broom cupboard in our office, and we're able to talk to you over there.
No, we're not.
You can just be the modern day Harry Potter. So, you know.
People won't be able to see this.
No, they won't.
We're in a mansion. It's like a big, massive studio. We are richer than everyone else.
Yeah, we've lots of fountains.
Yeah, lots of fountains. It's unnecessarily amount of fountains. Like
ridiculous amount of fountains over here.
There's a fountain.
Oh, wow. Well, that's something to envy.
So tell us a little bit about the care system in Australia. What is going well and what is not going well over there? Is there anything we can learn from you over there, you guys?
What's going? I could probably answer what's not going well a little bit easier first. It's not as consistent as what it probably could be, and there's a lot of bureaucracy around it as well, and it's quite politically charged, whereas that can be a good thing in the case that you've got government oversight of it all. It can also mean that there's a lot of red tape involved, and there's a lot of toing and froing, and things take a lot longer than normal because they have to be approved, and that takes a lot of time and isn't really practical when it comes to the rearing of a child. So, but what works well, I suppose, the child safety officers that we have, or our CSOs, a lot of children tend to report that they have a good connection with their CSOs, and they feel supported by them. That is when they're lucky enough to be able to stick with that one CSO for a while. It's inconsistent though, because in a lot of cases, CSOs change regularly and quite sporadically. So one day you may have a CSO that you've got a great connection with, whereas the next day you may have a brand new one, and you might not even be told that you have a brand new one. So there's that's a loaded question.
It's funny. It's you could very well be talking about the care system here as well, and I think that's why it's a good idea to give the platform to young people with care experience to be able to talk about this, because there's an awful lot of the problems across the board that were shared. We were talking last year to some of the young people from New Zealand, and they were talking about the stigma of being in care. And I just thought it was interesting that the thing that they brought up, like the far side of the planet, totally different culture, different legislation, but the young people are kind of going through the same stuff, you know, and there has to be a lot we can learn from that, like, you know.
Yeah, I think the stigma is definitely something that, you know, everyone feels, and I've never met someone with a care experience that doesn't say that there's definitely a stigma. So it's 100% there, and it can't be avoided. And to hear at times some people say, oh no, that's just what you feel, or you know, that might not be the case for everyone, is completely just not true, because it is the case for all kids in care pretty much. And it's not just and if other people around the world are saying that they feel that too, then it's clearly not just one person saying that that's the way that they feel about the situation. So yeah, no, I think as well, a lot of that has to do with the way we talk about it, you know. And as you said, like, making sure that kids are involved in it all is a big part of that as well. And whereas we're starting to move more towards involving kids in that, it hasn't always been the case, and we're still only really fresh with that, and kids' opinions are only starting to be heard now. Like, we're starting to, you know, like with the Create Foundation here, like, we get to go to meetings with the Minister for Child Safety, for example, every now and then, and we get to talk to her about what we feel are the problems, and she'll decide what she does with that. And that kind of makes you feel like you can be a bit more involved, and it helps them to see as well what their policies do and how they actually impact us as the people that they're about, which I think is really important as well in helping remove that stigma a little bit, because you can get an understanding of where the kid's at. So yeah, it's kind of all a new thing that they're doing, so they're starting to learn to do that well, I suppose.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
you think that would have been like that for ages? Like, that would be a huge thing in, like, improving everything, and the stigma as well. I think more awareness and understanding and just information is what will, like, solve that, because we're like any culture and thing, if people don't know about it, they'll like nearly create like these urban myths. Like,
yeah, and they do. Like I hear all the time, just day to day, and I know other kids as well, like things like, for example, there's a lot of people that I know that wouldn't know that I was a kid in care, and then when they do find out, they'll say something like, oh wow, I would have never guessed that because you've turned out this way. That clearly highlights that they have this myth about some way that we're supposed to turn out. And while statistically the outcomes aren't great, it seems to be that people focus on the fact that those kids didn't turn out great, rather than focusing on the fact that what happened to those kids caused that outcome, and it wasn't really something that they could control.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Like, it's amazing. It seems like such a no-brainer from my point of view, and from Epic's point of view as well, that, you know, bringing young people in to participate in their own care planning. Like, why would you not do that? And then you expect them to have agency over their lives once they turn 18. and they haven't had any agency over their lives up until the age of 18. Like, how is that going to work? And it's great work the creator are doing over there in pushing the voice of the child forward when the decision makers and legislators are making those decisions. We were looking up like, it's kind of well documented that Ireland has a pretty horrific history in terms of the clerical abuse scandal and in the industrial schools and stuff like that over here. But I know Australia, from looking into it, there's been an awful lot of awful things that's happened to kids from either the indigenous people or from the last generation that came over here. And it's really important, I think, that we get to talk about these things so history doesn't repeat itself, that people who are making decisions are going to always listen to the voice of the children in there. I think it's a hugely important piece of work. How is the restoration process going over there between the people who've been subject to that and the government?
How to answer that diplomatically?
You don't have to be diplomatic. No, it's cool.
I think that's a bit of a touchy spot, I think, because like over here, for example, it wasn't even that long ago, we have like our local, I don't know, like breakfast show, which is, they call themselves news, but it's not news, it's some other bullshit that they just decided to stir up. Where like they pretty much took a snippet of a few like short videos of like Indigenous children in a community and put it all together and made a story about it and pulled little bits and pieces from it and sort of alluded to the fact that those children were being mistreated when if you dug deeper on where they found all that footage from, it was actually just from a documentary where they were talking about Indigenous culture and they mashed it all together and made it into this big piece about how they're being mistreated and not being cared for. And that wasn't even that long ago. I think it was only like 6 years ago. So like you hear all the time, like they make up stories that they say, they say stolen generation was over and it was like 40 years ago, and when in actual fact they're still making up stories about Indigenous people being mistreated by their own communities when they're actually just mixing up pieces from a documentary and saying things that weren't even true, and putting that on news and calling it news, and then everybody else sees it and so then they believe it as well.
And it's just reinforcing their bias and their racism, and they're not accepting that the intergenerational trauma happens. Like if you it doesn't just finish with one kid. This can go on through generations, and accepting that trauma doesn't exist with one person. That could be passed on through generations.
And they don't acknowledge that at all when they put it out there. And because it's a lot of like people follow social media, they follow what they see on TV. So they start to believe it and then they talk about it, and that's how it all spreads. Because I recently did a few assignment pieces for my uni work on that exact same thing, and it's stuff that like I wouldn't ordinarily know about, and the only reason I know about it is because I did that research and because I did those assignments, and like we had to dig deeper into it and find it and break it down and find out what actually happened. And coming across that was like a massive shock because, you think, they're reunifying, they're building up a relationship again, but they're actually not. And when you dig deeper into it, they don't feel that way at all. The Indigenous people, they don't feel that way at all. So
I'm not sure whether it was in Queensland, but it could have been New South Wales that were bringing in a law about after 2 years of being in the care system that they were looking at adoption.
I think that's everywhere they were starting to try it, like everywhere's talking about it.
Okay.
But whether or not it's being processed is a different matter.
Okay.
I think I thought it was Victoria actually.
It could have been.
It was New South Wales.
It was New South Wales. Okay.
Yeah, I was reading this morning. Yeah.
Because we'd have like I suppose it's an interesting one. Obviously, the child needs to have a stable placement as possible. But I think 2 years is a very short amount of time, because we see it in England, because we work with young people who may have been in the care system and then got pregnant, and we'd see that a lot of the young mums would state that they seem to be under much closer scrutiny from the social care, from the social work, than their counterparts who are not in the care system. So you could have a situation where a young woman gives birth at the age of 17, the kids go into care, she may end up in addiction or in an abusive relationship, and they've only got 2 years to get her stuff together. Like that, it seems like a very short amount of time to give the mum an opportunity, or the family an opportunity, to get their act together. And then if it's adoption, then their rights. It's an interesting one for the conflict of different parties' rights. But like you say at the very start, the child's voice should be integral to that whole decision making.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Was I think if that decision were to be made, it would have to be made in consultation with the child.
Exactly.
So in saying that, the child would need to be old enough to understand that as well. And unless obviously you've got your extreme circumstances where it really isn't a fit situation, and parents are definitely unfit, like if it's like they're in jail for something serious or something like that. Like it's not a one shoe fits all kind of thing.
Exactly.
It has to be a case by case situation that's assessed individually for what that case is. And I think, unfortunately, I don't know for you guys, but here we try and it seems they try to have like one policy for everyone and say, oh, this is our rule and this is what we do and this is how we assess it. But it's not flexible enough to allow for each individual person's case being different, because everybody is different. So obviously their case is going to be different. What's happened to them is different and their circumstances are different. So you can't assess them all on one rule.
Exactly. And which makes it a more complex system, but it's a very complex situation that these young people and these families find themselves in. So it needs to be a very complex process. And most of the time it is. There's lots of grey areas around situations like that. Sorry, you might have heard the phone going off there a little bit. We're in the office. Usually we do our podcast in the evening when the phone isn't going off. But what time of the day is it over there?
Right now, 7:45 p.m.
Okay, well, what are we at now? It's about 9:30, is it? Quarter to 10.
Quarter to 10.
Okay.
Hanging on.
We linked in with you guys last year with Create about Care Day. Is there any things happening over there for Care Day this year, which is on the 21st of February?
With Create, I'm not sure. I think they're just like obviously putting it out there, saying like this is Care Day, and they always do something inclusive with the younger kids and something for the older kids as well, like a little party thing, or like we'll do like pizza or something like that, and acknowledge like we're kind of all just like one big happy family, all of us. So they kind of like to make sure that we feel connected, and they'll have like connection days or things like that to make sure that we're all feeling.
Connection Day, tell us a bit about that. That sounds
really interesting.
So Connection Days, I went to a few when I was quite a lot younger, actually. Like they're just something that's really fun, that a bunch of kids that were in care or are still in care like get together, and I don't know, we just kind of all have fun together. And it's nice because like we were talking about stigma earlier, but when you're with a group of people with the same, like that have gone through the same system, there's no stigma, and you can kind of relax and enjoy it a bit more because no one's judging anyone. Like you're all sort of in the same boat. Like while each experience is different, you're all together and you really are kind of like a big family. And I think that's the beauty of Create, really, is that you get to connect with a bunch of people that have been through something similar to you, and not feel like you're some outlandish different person, which is nice. So they run them pretty regularly, which is nice. Like they'll take us to like a theme park or something, and we'll just have a great time.
Jeez, they're getting good funding.
Yeah.
It is a amazing to see when you come together with other people with care experience. Like everyone understands like everyone's situation, or maybe not fully, obviously, because it's very complex. But like it's just accept it and kind of move on. And then,
and the sense of community, the sense of space that sometimes might have been missing from a young person's life, and it's great to be able to be in a situation to harness that energy. And one of the amazing things is to meet with young people who want to make it better for the next generation of young people in care, and kind of harness that energy and mobilize that community to make positive changes in society. Like I know I've said it's a bit of a cliche, right? Like people say education is hugely important for children who are in care, young people in care, but it's equally as important to educate the public about the care system and about all the systemic barriers that exist for young people trying to get out of the care system and trying to exist and kind of live to their potential. And a lot of this stuff, it's not malice that these things are in there, these barriers, but it's just lack of knowledge.
It's lack of education. Like even within certain communities, if they don't know, like mental health, like it's become more prominent and more people are talking about it. Like it could be passed off of like, instead of like that person has like mental health issues, like they're just like, oh, they're weird or they're sick or there's something just wrong with them, like don't go around them. And instead of saying, oh, that's an unhealthy person who needs like help,
needs support,
because they don't like, and it's not their fault, it's the lack of understanding that, oh, like these things are real, because it's like, oh, I've not experienced it, it's not like been on my like at my doorstep, so it's like it mustn't be real. Like you often find people who are like, oh, like I knew it, but I didn't realize that until it happened to me. And like it's quite interesting, even with like humor, how people won't joke about certain things because they're affected by it, but they'll joke about something even worse. It's interesting to see like what they deem as important just because of their world, and it's just their world. It's not anyone else's, and it's lack of like knowledge, education, and just there's some ignorance there as well if you just want to be stuck there.
Yeah, and there's a bias that is always reinforced by the media, by mainstream media, about people who are different, by people like you were mentioning there with the Aboriginal kids. There is a bias that is bias, and that needs to be called out. And that's why we're really happy to be able to do podcasts like this, to say, it is a community, there's a care community, and to extend it out to even the absolute far side of the world. I think that's amazing. And listen, I think that's it. We're chatting for about half an hour now. It's been an absolute it's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, and we hope to have you on again. We're going to continue this little project. As soon as it's up online, we'll let you know. And hopefully you'll come back again. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you guys.
Lovely. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.
So, what do you think of that? Great interview with Leilani.
Oh, that was amazing. That was definitely one of the best interviews. It was so interesting. We'll definitely have to do it again because she has so much information. Makes us sound smart because we're associated with the conversation. I didn't say much. I said, yeah, but I'm smart for it.
She's a bright person, all right, and it's amazing the amount of similarities between the care system over here, and we're going to do more stuff with that as well. It was Leilani Houston, brilliant. We'll have her back on again.
Yeah. It was absolutely. It was just great, and it was just the tip of the iceberg, and it was interesting, the views, and even the connection days as well. Like
we'll find out more about that.
Yeah, like everything just sounds very brilliant.
Okay. All right. Thanks a million for listening to that from myself, Peter Lane, and Thomas Mongan. We had a great night on Friday night in the Cobblestone. I want to say a big thanks to Tom in the Cobblestone there, Tom Mulligan, a great lad, and also Apo, who came up from Newbridge to play with us. He put on a great show, and the rest of the lads in Vagabonds and Thieves as well. Of course, the Connor and Jazzy J, and also Thomas, Dylan and Luke performed their songs as well, and it was a lovely night. It was a really lovely night. Anyone there, I think they really enjoyed it, especially the raffle rap, which went on a bit longer than I thought it would. But anyway, listen, we hope you'll listen to the next one. If you have any queries about advocacy, please have a look at epiconline.ie. Have also a look at careday.org. Care Day is going to be coming up on Friday now, Friday the 21st, and we really hope you'll be able to show your support on social media or any other way you can. Okay, listen, thanks very much. Mind yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye.
Like and subscribe to the Caresystem podcast.